Is now first. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham is with us. Senator, look, you're as involved in Homeland Security and national security as anybody in Washington. Do you know anything about these drones?
Well, I know this, that the people telling you have nothing to worry about are the same people in charge of the border. It's not so much lying, it's incompetence. The only way we'll ever convince the American people what's going on here is to have the Trump administration level with you. I don't know what's going on. I've never been more worried about an attack on the homeland than I am right now. The border is completely broken. We've got a chance to control our border early on in Congress. I hope we're smart enough to take it. We're playing Russian roulette with our national security. But this is a combination of years of being lied to and incompetency coming together. Why are all these sightings in November? There's something new going on. This was the people telling us about the drones have lived there all their lives. So there's something new going on. What is that something new, and why is it around military bases?
Yeah, well, okay, the governor of New Jersey, a Democrat, says they are sophisticated, and the moment you put eyes on them, they go dark. Okay, right. Then we had another congressman saying they tend to cluster and then separate. They'll move forward, they'll move backwards, not the movements that an aircraft would normally make or be able to make. So there's something going on here. If it is sophisticated, it seems to me that they have to know, otherwise there would be a greater sense of urgency. Now, I'd rather be lied to if the option is that they don't know, which to me would be a national security disaster and failure, or they do know and just are not telling us and lying to us. I'd prefer the lie part, although I don't like being lied to.
Yeah, well, your problem is, how do you know when they're lying versus when they're incompetent?
When they open their mouth.
Well,
wait, is that a quiz?
Well, okay. Are they lying when they open up their mouth, or are they incompetent when they open up their mouth? I mean, they told us the border was secure. That's clearly that's a lie. Their policies don't work, and they try to tell you things that just are not credible. Why is this going on now? The people telling us about the drones, recording this information, have lived there for years. This is something new. Something the size of a bus or an SUV is not something you buy off the shelf. It's not a hobby. So I don't want to alarm anybody. I just don't buy this. I don't trust these people to tell me the truth, and I can't wait till President Trump gets in office. We got to secure that border. We're talking about drones today. What about terrorists on the watch list here in the largest numbers ever? What about a broken border where 13 million people have come into our country? What about lack of bed space to keep them in custody, having to turn them loose? What about the lack of agents to deport them? What about building the wall? The number one priority of the Republican Party should be to secure your border. You had a piece right before I came on saying people trust Trump. World leaders are rallying around him. He has credibility. Let me tell you this to the Republicans. If we don't deliver on the border, we're going to lose that credibility. It was the number one position of President Trump to secure our border on day one. If we don't do that on day one, we're making a huge mistake.
We'll get into more in the next segment on this, but why is Joe Biden selling off, the remainder of the border wall the taxpayers paid for pennies on the dollar, knowing that Donald Trump is going to use it or wants to use it on day one? And can that be stopped in your view?
It can be. I talked to Senator Cotton about this. They're bitter. They're trying to undercut Trump building the wall, putting the technology in to secure the border. Everything he wants to do, they're against. And to the last minute of the last day, the last hour of the last day, they're going to try to undercut President Trump. Selling off the border wall is insane. We should not sell it. We should put it up. And they're making sure we have to buy it anew. No respect for the taxpayer, by the way. Who paid for that border wall? You did. And they're selling it for pennies on a dollar. Why? They don't want to build the wall. They lost the election. They're trying to undercut the man that beat them.
Okay, so everything that we're talking about here, kind of very few on the left seem to understand it. I played the comments of Van Jones, and let me be clear, Donald Trump is smarter than you, me, and all his critics. And when you look at bread and butter issues, Americans don't want to pay you know, as much as we're paying for a gallon of gasoline. They don't want high inflation. They don't want wide open borders. They don't want to be lied to about Joe's cognitive state, the economy, borders. They don't want war in Europe, and they don't want war in the Middle East, and that's what they have delivered. That's where the mandate comes from. This is not as complicated. And I'll tell you one other thing. They don't want taxpayer-funded sex change operations for illegals, and they don't want woke in their public schools, and they don't want gender-affirming care without parental consent. You want me to keep going?
Well, you can go and go, but here's what you should ask the Republican Party. What are you going to do about it on day one? I'm working with Stephen Miller to come up with the most transformational border security bill in the history of the country. We need to change our energy policy on day one. We need to open up American land for drilling for oil and gas that we own to make us more energy independent. We need to address inflation on day one. We need to cut our taxes this year so they don't expire, the tax cuts don't expire. I'm looking for a very aggressive agenda coming early on in 2025. To my Republican friends, if we don't deliver, people will turn on us. We got a chance to deliver. We better do it.
Okay. Please make the tax cuts permanent. Include no tax on tips, Social Security, and overtime. That'd be good. Keep promises made. Keep them all. Senator Graham, thank you.